Welcome to the Tribes TLC webinar about the agreements. Why, what, and how they promote a caring learning environment. This presentation is brought to you by CenterSource Systems, LLC. All of the content is property of and copyrighted by CenterSource Systems, LLC, and cannot be distributed or reproduced for any purpose without permission from CenterSource Systems, LLC. This webinar is strictly a presentation, although you're invited to pause and reflect along the way if you want, either intrapersonally or interpersonally. And I suggest that you keep some sort of journal or notes for the end when you may want to discuss the reflection questions and make comments with your colleagues watching with you. If you're viewing this by yourself, we welcome your questions or comments at tribes@tribes.com. If you would like a PDF of this presentation, please email us at tribes@tribes.com. Plan on this taking about 20 minutes without pausing the program. I'm your presenter. I'm Mary Palin. I'm a staff trainer for CenterSource Systems. I have many years experience as a classroom teacher, predominantly in middle school. I've taught special ed, I've been a resource specialist, a language development specialist, and for the last 5 years I was in alternative education for 7th and 8th graders. I'm a Tribes TLC trainer, and I'm a professional development consultant for CenterSource Systems. Here's a quick overview and review of the Tribes process, defined as a purpose, a process, a structure, and a practice. Take a minute to read over this and review it for yourself, and note that this webinar is only about one element of this Tribes TLC process, just about the agreements. Grab one of your Tribes books. You'll see them there. If you don't have a Tribes book, you can go to www.tribes.com and order one. Each book contains over 100 strategies for implementing and supporting the Tribes process, as well as detailed research that enables the reader to understand and apply the essential elements of the Tribes process. You'll see the Tribes trail up in the corner of your screen. The page numbers are next to each book. Take a look at that Tribes trail, and you will see, noted by a big blue arrow on this screen, that the agreements begin the trail or the path. So let's begin our why, what, how agreements with the why. Gene Gibbs is the author of those 3 books and one more dedicated to the Tribes TLC process. Here are her own words introducing the agreements in the Reaching All in Creating Tribes Learning Communities book. I suggest you read it more than once and notice that her words address bullying and social emotional learning as well. The year was 2006, well before the media had heightened awareness on either of these topics. So now you know why the agreements are so important to a classroom, school, or culture at school. Let's talk about what. What are the agreements? There are 4: attentive listening, the right to pass, also defined as the right to participate, appreciations, which is the opposite of no put-downs, or is the opposite of put-downs, and mutual respect. Here are the agreements defined, again, from one of the Tribes books you saw on the earlier slide. I'm doing some assuming that you have some familiarity with the agreements. These are brief definitions. You can certainly get more about the agreements from any of the 3 tribes books that were previously listed. So now let's talk about how. How do you support and manage the agreements in your classroom, in your school, in your life? I'm going to take you through these suggestions, how you might use visuals, how you might incorporate them into class or school rules, how they might be part of the instructions in what you do in your classroom on a daily basis, in your procedures, how multiple intelligences can be involved, how there are strategies for management and support, how the research plays in, how it might be part of your discipline policy if it's not already, how to troubleshoot, and consider naming the elephant in the room. So let's talk about visuals. CenterSource has posters for both elementary and secondary. You can see some examples there. They've got cute little animals for elementary school, and they've got photos of the agreements in action for middle and high school students. Or you can design your own, or you can have students design. If you look at those agreements across the bottom, those were done by a high school student in Alberta who photoshopped the agreements. The more your students are involved in creating the visual representation and definition of the agreements, the more they support, buy in, and endorse the agreements. In my classroom, we had a huge collage. Students contributed words or pictures that defined and illustrated the agreements. And here they are again. I believe a really important application and synthesis of the agreements is to correlate the agreements with your class rules and procedures. Think of a class rule you have. Does it fit under one of the agreements? What if you asked your students to fit the rules of the class into the agreements? I believe when you introduce or even review the agreements, giving students the opportunity to see the relationship helps them to internalize and get behind the agreements. You can use an umbrella, a Venn diagram, or another graphic organizer to illustrate. Also, it's important to know that Gene Gibbs, the author of Tribes, invites and encourages you to add an additional agreement that is specific to your school or philosophy. But I would caution you that more than 5 agreements, and students can be more likely to forget or overlook them and not reinforce them with each other. So one last point about your class and school rules and the agreements. Think about your school or classroom rules. Are they intrinsic or extrinsic? Do students need to get something for good behavior? The agreements are intrinsic. Another popular program, PBIS, if you'd like information on how the Tribes TLC process fits with PBIS, email us at tribes@tribes.com. Another missed opportunity for reviewing and defining the agreements is in the instructions or directions or expectations. So whenever introducing a tribe strategy, a new grouping or seating arrangement, transitioning from one subject to another, getting ready to leave or enter the classroom, review or incorporate the agreements and the directions. For example, let's say you're transitioning from a topic or a class or a grouping, a seating arrangement. You could say something like, when I say go, please show me mutual respect and attentive listening by moving quickly, quietly, and respectfully to your station or group. Go. You've just planted that seed of, oh yeah, I need to remember those agreements. Let's say you're giving instructions for a learning experience. Here's another example. I might say, you are about to participate in a jigsaw. Here's how the agreements should be present. Attentive listening will be crucial both when sharing in your focus group and especially when you're discussing different points of view in your home tribe or group. No put-downs should be present in your mind when you're discussing different points of view, especially in your focus group. Mutual respect goes right along with that. The right to pass and the right to participate is also a real key player. Your participation in your home tribe or group is imperative. Okay, so maybe at this point you even ask students how they see the right to pass. You might avert that awkward moment when students choose to pass and it has a real effect on the group's interdependence or accountability in completing the learning at hand. So incorporating the agreements into instructions and front-loading your expectations can really make a difference. Here's one for multiple intelligence lovers. If you don't have this book, I highly recommend you get it. You can get it through www.tribes.com. We have a bookstore as well. Thomas Armstrong presents multiple ways to know listening. This is taken right from this book. While you're reading, I'll talk, and it's my experience that whenever students are given the chance or the challenge to express what they know through the multiple intelligences, I always learn something as well. Again, the more students think, construct meaning, and apply the agreements personally, the bigger and better is the buy-in and internalization. Here's another suggestion for you. If you like this, what you see for attentive listening, expressed multiply intelligent, invite your students or, make it a class project or assignments to do the same for the other agreements. Anyone who can multiply explain or demonstrate the agreements through the multiple intelligences, I think has a pretty good grasp on what they are. There's a lot of strategies in your book that can be used to manage and support the agreements. Here's a couple that I've come up with. A look, sounds, feels chart, a suggestion circle, especially if an agreement is not being honored too much or the way you want it to go. You could jigsaw the agreements. There's 4 of them. You could do a thumbs up, thumbs down to check for understanding on how the agreements apply to whatever's going to come up next or what you just did. Students could brainstorm ways to support or things to do for other people to understand the agreements. Appreciations and apologies is a great strategy to do at the end of the day or the end of the week. Something good and wishful thinking are both great strategies for positive acknowledgement and thinking. And you could even develop an action plan for your class or even students within your class. What strategy might you add to the list? Here's a little quote from Jean about some research behind the agreements involving the brain, human development, and resiliency, all parts of the tribe's TLC process. Neuroscience, human development, and resiliency research concur that children's academic, social, and emotional learning depends upon the existence of a safe and caring, threat-free environment. Your discipline policy. Here's just a little excerpt from the California Ed Code. In our school, when students were sent to the office for a disciplinary action, they were expected to verbalize or fill out in writing an incident report. The first question was, what agreement did you break, ignore, or fail? You might want to have a discussion with your staff, students, and or administrators and attend to how the agreements will affect the culture of your school. Incorporating the agreements in your discipline policy is not about punishment for agreements infractions. It's about how we are in this school and how you choose to be a part of that, and how the agreements support a safe and caring environment. Troubleshooting. It's not going to be rosy every day. When in doubt, ask, what's going on? What's wrong with that group back there, or what's happening in that group? Or if you're having a day where it just seems to be a put down fest out there, you might want to stop and say, look, what's wrong with us agreeing to have no put downs? What's wrong with being nice to each other? How can I help you? How can I change things? You'll see a little diagram there of the timeout reflection cycle. When in doubt, stop, look, listen, describe what you see and hear, decide what you might do next, or ask the question, what's happening right now? Maybe you need to revisit inclusion or revisit resiliency, especially those protective factors. And are you modeling the agreements? They're watching you all the time. So, naming that elephant in the room, what does that mean? Well, whenever you introduce something new, as Jean says here, building the positive environment begins by replacing unspoken norms of the school. All groups and organizations have tacit norms that affect behavior by conveying, this is how we do things around here. So what negative norms or injunctions do you, your staff, or school need to name? Do you tease your students? You don't mean to, it's not put downs, it's teasing. Do you gossip in the staff room? Do you hear teachers yelling, be quiet, to get attentive listening? Are people interrupting one another? Do people do paperwork during staff meetings? Is there a lack of mutual respect? Whenever something new is introduced to a group, even if it's positive, there's going to be a level of discomfort or concern. It's a change. Someone will challenge it. Remember, modeling the agreements is absolutely the essential factor. Jean says that in her book more than once. If the staff does not model the agreements among themselves and for their students, why should the students agree to? Well, we're nearly at the end, and we can't stop or leave without a little bit of reflection. So I would invite you to do some thinking about these questions that I suggest for your reflection, and or discuss them with whomever you're watching this little webinar with. Again, if you'd like to send us any response or comment to tribes@tribes.com, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for attending this webinar, and I hope you've enjoyed it.